Round 2 of the 2018 Dunlop Endurance Championship brought us to Silverstone. A terrific entry of 34 cars and close to 70 drivers would contest 2 races around the full Grand Prix circuit, making this the championship's biggest grid yet since its relaunch 2 years ago. Andy Dimitru and Luke Williams arrived here as the early points leaders in the Endurance Championship after a very successful weekend in the season opener. They took their Black Mamba Racing Ginetta G55 to 2 class wins in the 2 races at Rockingham, including an outright victory in the 2-hour endurance race. Meanwhile, the separate sprint championship was being led by Richard Neary, following a pair of excellent wins in round 1. However, an issue in qualifying here at Silverstone meant that he was able to complete just 3 laps in the session.
Unfortunately, we picked a puncher up before we started our session, fortunately we've got tyre pressure monitoring system on the dashboard, so I noticed that my outside rear tyre was starting to lose pressure, so I did 1 lap quite slowly and watched, and it lost another 0.5 bar of pressure, and then the next lap it lost the same again, so I knew I'd got a puncture, so I did 1 more lap to complete the 3 mandatory laps and then boxed the car.
Despite his lack of running, Neary was still able to qualify 4th fastest in the ABBA Commercials Mercedes AMG. 3rd fastest was the McG Racing Taranis, as long-term series supporter Johnny Mcgregor and teammate Ben Sharich enjoyed their first outing of the season. But the front row of the grid would be shared by a pair of FF Course Run Ferrari 458s. With 3 Britcar titles between them, David Mason and Ross Wiley set the second fastest time of the session in the number 7 machine. While pole position went to teammates Ivor Dunbar and Johnny Molan by an impressive 1.8 seconds. The fastest Class 2 car was the ALP Racing Seika Rapex. Alan Perbrick and David Bryce would line up 5th on the grid, albeit they were just 0.2 of a second quicker than class rivals Michael Igoe and Adam Wilcox in the JMH Automotive Porsche 911. The best Class 3 qualifiers were Endurance Championship leaders Andy Dimitru and Luke Williams in the number 22 Ginetta, closely followed by their stablemates at Black Mamba Racing, Jade Kruger and Chris Papageorgiou. Quickest in Class 4 was the Moss Motorsport BMW of Christian Prosser and John Watt, despite this coming together with the number 33 Century Motorsport Ginetta.
I'm not quite sure what happened. Obviously, each driver has their own point of view. From my point of view, I was stuck behind a slower car. They put out the blue flags to say let the faster car through, and as I came to come down the inside, the car that had been given the blue flags turned in on me and we made contact. That's how I see it. Anyway, obviously we've come into this weekend, I think, in like the joint lead of the championship in that car, so not getting out for this afternoon is going to be a bit fatal. At the moment, it looks like we might not be getting out for both races, so not a good weekend.
Meanwhile, it was Tim Docker who topped the times in Class 5 aboard his Maximum Motorsport run VW Sirocco. So here's confirmation of the top 10 times from qualifying, with Ivor Dunbar and Johnny Molan set to line up on pole position for the first race of the day, which would be the shorter of the 2, a 50-minute sprint race, with a 2-hour endurance race to follow later in the afternoon. As normal, both races would feature 1 mandatory pit stop. It was Ivor Dunbar who took the wheel of the pole-sitting number 5 Ferrari for the start of the race, but halfway around the first lap he was passed by fellow front-row starter Ross Wiley as the cars headed into Abbey for the first time. Having already moved up to 3rd, Richard Neary followed him through on the exit, and by the time they charged into the fast left-hander at Farm, the Mercedes was through to 2nd place. Just behind the lead trio, David Bryce had moved up to 4th in the Seika. Further back amongst the huge field of cars that continued to head into Abbey Corner was the number 71 WDC Racing BMW of Neil Garnham and Rob Young, charging through from the back of the grid, having missed qualifying. By lap 3, Wiley and Neary had both begun to pull away from Dunbar and were now enjoying a close fight for the lead of the race. Having only previously had a couple of outings in the Taranis, part-time racer Ben Sharich was still acclimatising to the prototype and fell from 3rd to 8th in the early stages. 1 car to gain positions during the opening laps was the XBT-CC race-winning Audi of Rob Austin. Now entered into Britcar by Alex and Robert Day, it led Class 4 in 11th place overall. With 2 class podiums at Rockingham, Endurance Championship hopefuls Simon Rudd and Tom Barley were again running third in class in the number 24 Team Hard Ginetta. Then an early spin for Kevin Riley's Mosler on the exit to the loop. This would ultimately drop him from 7th down to 28th place as he lost over 50 seconds trying to get the car fired back up. By lap 4, we had our third different race leader, as Richard Neary now came to the fore in the ABBA Commercials Mercedes, the same 6.2-litre V8 machine that took him to 9th place in the 2017 British GT Championship. Ivor Dunbar was still running third and now 10 seconds adrift in the number 5 Ferrari. However, the ultra-experienced and very rapid Johnny Molam would be taking the wheel for the second stint. The David Bryce Saker still headed Class 2 in 4th place, with another Class 2 outfit, the number 98 Porsche of Adam Wilcox and Mike Ligo, running 5th overall, ahead of John Seale's white Ferrari 458. And the Class 2 Volvo S60 silhouette of Sam Allpass and Neil Primrose was coming under attack from the Class 3 leaders for 8th place overall. Luke Williams making the move in the number 22 Black Mamba Ginetta as he tried to put some distance between himself and teammate Jade Kruger. On the approach to Village Corner, Kruger then followed suit as he squeezed down the inside with a terrific move under braking. Run by Jeff Steele Racing, the Volvo, a former Spa 12-hour race-winning machine, was making its Britcar debut, having been in a Belgian motor museum for some time. Meanwhile, the battle at the head of the field raged on as Wiley managed to find a way back ahead of Neary on the way into Stowe Corner. Another close battle saw the invitation entries of 198 Lee Frost and 124 Lucky Kerra running nose to tail in their Ginettas, until Frost came in for his mandatory stop at almost exactly half distance. And there was a tussle between the Class 2 Porsches of number 69, for Spoke Cars Racing entry of Marcus Fothergill and Dave Bennett, and the green and white Arrow Pack International entry of Peter Chalice. Once everyone had taken their mandatory pit stops in, Richard Neary emerged as the race leader, and with the gentleman driver David Mason having taken over from his faster teammate Ross Wiley, the number 7 Ferrari quickly fell to 3rd place, behind the number 5 equivalent of Johnny Molam. He now set about trying to catch the Mercedes in the remaining 9 laps of the race. Now up to 4th place overall was the JMH Porsche of Igo and Wilcox. It was 50 seconds adrift of the David Mason Ferrari, but closing the gap rapidly. And catching the pair of them was the MacG Racing team leader Johnny Mcgregor, now instilled in 6th place aboard the Tyrannus. And the only other car still on the lead lap was the Class 2 FF Course Ferrari 488 of lone driver John Seale in 7th place. Having run 4th for the first half of the race, the ALP Racing Saker had now dropped back to 8th place overall. In Britcar, the minimum time for the mandatory stop is 90 seconds, but for any team finishing in the top 3 in class in the previous race, an additional penalty of 15, 10 or 5 seconds is added onto their minimum pit stop time. This meant that with the longer enforced stop, the number 22 Ginetta of Williams and Dimitru lost the Class 3 lead to teammates Kruger and Papageorgiou. And with an even shorter stop, Simon Rudd Tom Barley Ginetta was now much closer to them both. Another Ginetta going well was the Tockwith Motorsport entry of Matt Greenwood, which was now leading Class 4. During the opening stint, Greenwood's teammate Sarah Moore had managed to fend off the close attentions of British touring car ace Adam Morgan in the TCR Seat, now driven by Stuart Lines. Another Seat going well was the CF Alphatune entry of John Clonis and Chris Bentley, the leading Class 4 car within the sprint category. Tim Docker was on course for his 3rd consecutive Class 5 victory in only a 2nd weekend of Britcar competition, the VW Sirocco seeming to enjoy a trouble-free run. With just over a lap to go, Johnny Molam had caught Richard Neary for the overall lead of the race, the Ferrari hounding the Mercedes as they exited Luffield for the penultimate time. Meanwhile, Johnny Mcgregor had passed the David Mason Ferrari and the JMH Porsche during the closing laps to move up to 3rd place overall, following on from the team's 2017 podium at this track. Now down to 5th place, Mason was still running in the top 3 within the sprint category and had to maintain 100% concentration for the final lap, given that the Ferrari of John Seale was approaching fast in his mirrors. The spectacular-looking Volvo of Sam Allpass and Travis drummer Neil Primrose was running a comfortable 7th, while the Team Hard Ginetta emerged as the Class 3 leader in 8th place, having found a way past the number 6 Black Mamba Ginetta of Chris Papageorgiou, and with the sister car of Andy Dimitru having retired from the race. Approaching Brooklands then for the final time, and it was the FF Course Ferrari that came into view first, with Mollem having found a way past Neary on the last lap of the race. Although he would have loved the overall victory, Neary would still pick up the sprint class win to further extend his advantage in that championship. Victory in the first race of the day, though, went to Johnny Mollem and Ivor Dunbar in the FF Course Ferrari, less than a second clear after 50 minutes of racing. Here's confirmation of how the top 10 finished, with the Porsche of Igo and Wilcox winning Class 2 in 4th place overall, and David Mason fending off John Seal on that final lap to hold on to 5th place and a sprint class podium. Let's hear now from our race winners.
It was a lot of fun. It was quite hectic at the beginning. 2 hot shots behind me and tried to keep them back as long as I could, and then tried to stay as close to them as I could and try and get up to speed with full tanks and cold tires as quickly as possible.
The battling was incredible with that Mercedes. How did you manage to do it just at the end?
Well, I mean, Richard, I have to say, hats off to him. He drove a beautiful race. I mean, I was able to catch him. So I knew then it was just down to traffic, and actually David Mason in the sister Ferrari coming up to Copse, we were catching him, and as we were coming down the pit straight, I thought we're going to catch him at just the right time for me, because Richard was in front and he caught him at the apex and he backed out of it. Unfortunately for me, he just moved back over to the right and he left about a car width on the left, and I just went down it. And then I got in front and gave Ivor his first overall win, and he deserves it because he did a superb job at the start. To do that with the heavy fuel and everything, I think he's proven to himself today and everybody else that he's stepped it up massively.
It's time for us to take a short break now, but we'll be back with a look at the 2-hour endurance race in a few minutes' time. Welcome back to Silverstone as we continue our report from round 2 of the Dunlop Endurance Championship. Amongst the record-breaking grid of 34 cars, one of the standout entries was this Volvo S60 Silhouette. The former Spa 12-hour winning car had finished 7th in race 1 on its Britcar debut.
It's been more difficult for Sam and myself and the team running at Jeff Steele Racing because it's an unknown quantity. We haven't really had any testing proper. We're not on the usual tyre, obviously, so you have to manage with what the time available and what you've got. But so far, it's going well.
After a couple of outings at the end of last season, the team at EDF Motorsport are enjoying their first full season in the championship with their Aston Martin Vantage.
The most difficult thing that I've had to overcome is that the tracks in the UK, I've done some tracks in Europe, but the tracks in the UK, every time I do one this year, is brand new. So on the Friday, like yesterday, I've had to get used to the track and come out here and race today. So I've been able to find my feet, and we did all right. It was good.
The second outing of the weekend would be a 2-hour endurance race, with the Endurance Championship entries contesting the full distance, while those involved in the Sprint Championship would contest only the first 50-minute portion of the race. With the grid based on the race 1 results, the number 5 FF Course Ferrari of Ivor Dunbar would start from pole, but with some concerns over his Mercedes, Richard Neary opted to start from the pit lane instead of the front row of the grid. So as the lights went out, Dunbar was unchallenged for the lead into Copse Corner, while the yellow Taranis of Ben Sharich and the Porsche of Michael Igo ran hand in hand for second. The Ferrari of Ross Wiley following them in 4th place, as the rest of the field charged into turn 1, including the Synchro Motorsport Honda Civic of Alan James in his new unfamiliar red colour scheme. Upon their arrival into Beckett's for the first time, it was Michael Igo's Porsche that arrived in 2nd place, just ahead of the Ross Wiley Ferrari. After an initial delay, Neary eventually exited the pit lane, the Sprint Championship leader with a lot of work to do. By the end of lap 1, Wiley had already moved into the lead, and it was the Class 2 leading Porsche that emerged from Woodcut Corner in 2nd place, with Igo having also found a way past the pole sitter. The Saker of David Bryce had charged from 9th to 4th, ahead of John Seale's Ferrari 488. Meanwhile, Ben Sharich was coming under pressure from the Black Mosler of Kevin Riley for 6th place, the latter having to come from 17th on the grid following his race 1 spin. A little further back was the white Team Hard Ginetta G55 of Adam Hatfield and Callum Hawkins-Rowe, who is enjoying his first outing of the season, having been a championship regular in 2017. The number 6 Black Mamba Racing Ginetta of Jade Kruger had picked up the Class 3 lead from Race 1 winner Tom Barley in the number 24 Team Hardcar. Meanwhile, the 22 machine of Luke Williams and Andy Dimitru was on a mission. Having led the Endurance Championship coming into the weekend, retirement from Race 1 meant they'd had to start from 30th on the grid. After just 3 laps, the Ginetta was already up to 14th place. Clearly now getting into his stride, Ivor Dunbar moved the FF Course Ferrari back ahead of Michael Igoe's JMH Automotive Porsche for 2nd place. Richard Neary, meanwhile, had been slicing his way through the field following his pit lane start. The Mercedes going from last to 6th in just 3 laps. British touring car title contender Adam Morgan was enjoying his 2nd Britcar outing in the Maximum Motorsport Seat of Stuart Lynes and ran just ahead of Sarah Moore's Tockwith Motorsport Ginetta for the lead of Endurance Class 4. 20 minutes into the race, the safety car was deployed to allow for several incidents to be cleared up. And as the field bunched up, rain began to fall. Amongst those to have crashed out was David Holloway in the Century Motorsport Ginetta and separately Kevin Riley in the Mosler. The safety car period coincided with mid-distance for the sprint class cars, and so the pit lane suddenly became a very busy place as those teams made their mandatory stops, including the Porsche Shop 911 of Ian Huard and Oliver Wilmot, enjoying a great race to run 4th in the sprint class. There was a sad end to the day for the ALP Saker of Alan Purbrick, which had been running in the top 5. The driver was fine, but the car out following an off-track excursion. Coming out on the other side of the safety car period and the pit stops as the sprint class leader was the remarkable Richard Neary. He picked up a 4th consecutive category victory despite starting from the pit lane. He even managed to win by a whopping 37 seconds, with Wiley and Mason 2nd in the Ferrari and Igoe and Wilcox as Class 2 winners and 3rd overall.
It wasn't an easy win. I wasn't really happy about driving my car over to the assembly area because I got a puncture doing that this morning, so I started last from the pit lane, which basically meant on the 2 front-running Ferraris, once I'd managed to clear the field, I was 50 seconds down. But then when the rain sort of started, we'd still to do our pit stop, so I said, look, I think we've already lost this race, put wets on. We've nothing to lose. If we've got it wrong, we've lost. If we get it right, we might get it back. And as it happens, it carried on raining and the track came back to me, so it was good.
Back on track, the endurance class cars continued to race in worsening conditions. Having briefly held the overall lead as cars pitted for wet tyres, the Jeff Steele Racing Volvo was running in an excellent 5th place. But no such luck for Chris Papageorgiou and Jade Kruger, as electrical problems halted the progress of their Class 3 leading Ginetta. Meanwhile, Race 1 winner Johnny Molam had established a clear lead in conditions that were far from clear. And Sean Cooper was absolutely revelling in the conditions behind the wheel of the track-focused KTM Crossbow. He now ran 2nd overall, with the car's owner Mike McCullum having started the race from 11th on the grid.
Well, we're on wet tyres, which is a good start. I was out there on slicks behind the safety car and then not behind the safety car, and it was treacherous on slicks. So we're on wets. The car's quite good in the wets, and Sean's very good in the wet. So we'll see.
Also driving superbly in the inclement conditions was Johnny Mcgregor. He ran 3rd overall, and his efforts would later be rewarded with the Sunoco Driver of the Day award. Equally as impressive was Stuart Lynes in the Maximum Motorsport Seat. The ex-touring car racer always goes well in the wet, and he now ran 4th overall. The current BTCC star Adam Morgan had driven the opening stint.
We managed to pit, I think, just at the right time under the safety car. Got the wets on, managed to rejoin the back of the field, which put us in a lap ahead and on the right tyres. So for us, it's gone pretty well. The track is pretty greasy and pretty slippy, but it's been good fun. I've really enjoyed it.
5th overall and leading Class 3 now was teenage British GT racer Callum Hawkins-Rowe, having taken over from Adam Hatfield. They ran comfortably ahead of the Andy Dimitru Luke Williams Ginetta, while Race 1 Class 3 winners Tom Barley and Simon Rudd looked set for another podium.
Being on slicks and in the rain is not a lot of fun. We held out until the window opened to change drivers. We made the right decision, changed tyres. I think Simon's actually just gone up to 3rd, so we're in 3rd in class now. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Late race victims of the rain were reigning sprint class champions Rick and Brad Nevison in the track-focused Porsche Cayman. And even some of the more experienced drivers were susceptible to being caught out by the growing amount of surface water, as was the case for Johnny Mcgregor with this quick spin on the exit to Copse. but he was about to be promoted into second place as an issue forced Sean Cooper into an unscheduled stop, and with 3 laps lost, the KTM would sadly drop out of the top 10. With less than 10 minutes remaining, somebody else making an unscheduled stop was race leader Johnny Molam. Some fresh tyres for the Ferrari, but with enough time in hand to retain the lead. With Stuart Lyons and Adam Morgan now promoted to third place overall, and Matt Greenwood following up on Sarah Moore's good opening stint work in the Tockwith Motorsports Ginetta, we now had 2 Class 4 cars in the top 5. And then a hairy moment for Mcgregor as the Taranis lost its bonnet, ejector seat style, with a few laps to go. An earlier excursion having loosened the clips. If not as pretty, the car was at least a little lighter. And after battling for the Class 3 lead, Luke Williams was the latest driver to crash out.
Conditions got tricky sort of midway through the race. I don't think they worsened at all through the race. Not sure, I just touched the brakes and it just speared off. I spoke to Jade in the sister car and he said he had a bit of trouble over oil a couple of times, so I wonder whether it was something like that. But at the end of the day, I've just tapped the brakes and gone into the wall. Got to put it down to myself, unfortunately, and so close to the win, which is the worst thing.
Given the amount of surface water, it was easy to see why Molam had made that late change for tyres, and erring on the side of caution, he brought the FF Course Ferrari home to celebrate a double victory with teammate Ivor Dunbar. They finished 1 lap clear of the Mac G Racing Taranis, with Lyons and Morgan a superb third in the Class 4 Seat.
Well, it certainly wasn't dull. There was lots of challenges, lots of things to cope with, but great fun, really great fun. We ended up in the right place at the end of both races. What's not to like?
By the end, because the track started drying out middle of my stint, the left rear was getting a bit bald, and then when it started raining again more heavily, I thought I'd broken a toe link or something. I was aquaplaning everywhere. I came in, just changed the left rear, so that made it almost as bad because the right rear was... But brought it home, and a second overall win, and Ivor had everything thrown at him this weekend and responded brilliantly.
First maybe a dozen laps or so were fine, even though there was a little bit of rain coming down, but then the safety car came out to retrieve the car stuck at the end of the lap, and then it was just at slow speed. It was becoming quite treacherous. All of a sudden the grip that you did previously have was no longer there, so it was quite nice that the safety car was long enough till the pit stop window.
It was quite a lonely race actually for me. I went for quite a few laps without seeing a single car, so I just kept trogging on. And the difficulty is when you get behind somebody in these conditions, the visibility drops significantly. So if there is a group, it can be quite difficult to get past them.
My radio had broke, and I was having trouble with the car aquaplaning, but at the end it was down to the wire. The one tyre was, so luckily we finished. And also I was out of fuel virtually, so I didn't really know whether to come in and refuel or what, but I kept going, and it went our way this weekend, I'll put it that way.
That class win puts Lyons and Morgan at the very top of the Endurance Championship standings, 3 points clear of Greenwood and Moore, and with erstwhile points leaders Demetrio and Williams dropping to third. Tim Docker is the Sprint Championship leader after a flawless start to the season in his Class 5 Sirocco, making it double joy for Maximum Motorsport. Richard Neary is just behind in second, with Alex and Robert Day third after a class victory in race 2. Round 3 of the championship takes us to one of the drivers' favourites, Alton Park in Cheshire. We'll see you there.